Beautiful day, here it is. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Neota Egbe.
Indeed, it's another morning, a day after the presentation of the budget. Good morning and welcome. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Indeed, it's a day that brings much hope. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
You know, where I'm from, they would say a cool budget. That's a greeting. That's, welcome to Lagos. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. While we can sneak up a smile to this morning, what is going on in Kano State is really concerning, and it's sad that this has gone on for this long. We understand that Kano State and politics are like 5 and 6. It's always intriguing. A lot of people pay special attention to politics in Kano State, and it's understandable. But when politics begins to go violent, then it's no more politics. It's just plain war. Yesterday, there was a killing of a young man, allegedly by a police inspector, and that again has caused major protests in that city, the ancient city of Kano. Now, the controversy is that this is not linked to the aftermath of the election. Of course, the appeal court judgment which sacked Governor Abba Yusuf. That's what the police is saying. But the NNPP says, well, it is linked, and that is what you get when you keep egging on protesters, whether from the APC or the NNPP or what have you, to go out there in the streets and protest, not forgetting that this case is essentially at the courts. Whatever you do on the streets most likely will not affect what goes on in the courts, because even the judges have said it themselves that we do not give our rulings based on emotions and based on what's happening on the streets. We give it based on what the Constitution says. Yes, there are controversies with that judgment. Yes, all of the parties do not seem to agree. Even legal practitioners do not agree naturally with that. But when you now take it out to the streets and you now see that people are killed, people are injured, and people can't go about their businesses, then we should actually call ourselves to order and say this has to stop right now. It is really difficult to say this is not related to politics, because we know that the NNPP and the APC have a major support base in Kano State. The police says, well, it was as a result of some sort of quarrel between rival gangs, or some said the rival gangs are actually NNPP and the APC. And again, you will understand that. But this is a time for us to call ourselves to order, from the people to the politicians. If the politicians are adamant, at least the people should rise up and say, well, we will not be willing tools in your hands. We will make sure that we keep ourselves safe and we at least voice our concerns the right way. So this is a wake-up call, actually, if the politicians do not want to listen, because they seem to think this is, business as usual. The people should wake up and say, well, enough is enough. This is our town, this is our city, and we will protect it. Because if you do not, you make the job difficult for the security agencies. Just yesterday, the Chief of Army Staff was saying that, some states are now stable. But if we keep having these things on our hands, then states will not be as stable as we want them to be. Bukola.
Indeed, Kade, you've given us a lot to chew on there, starting from the Kano State being the political capital of Nigeria. And indeed, the entire North, so to speak, it doesn't matter.
That,
Well, no, it doesn't matter that, comparatively, the Southwest is at an educational advantage to the North. The North has always been politically savvy, and Kano State is the capital, where that is concerned. So you see that the people are owning the process in a determined way, and that's commendable, regardless of the fact that the police in Kano State had given a zero-tolerance position towards protests, particularly, amid, the conflict that has been stirred by this controversial Kano State Court of Appeal judgment. But we must commend the people for, having some sort of awareness about what rightfully belongs to them and wanting to stand up for it. It may be, a colored political situation there, with the other party also trying to, own the process as well. But it's important, as you have said, for the politicians to rein in on their supporters such that it doesn't get out of hand. And it's also important to also ask questions of the police. What instructions, because they had declared a zero tolerance for protests, so what instructions did they give to their operatives? How did they try to manage the process, bearing in mind that the people had seemed determined, from days before now, that they were going to continue to protest? So what orders did they give, and how did the police operatives act in that regard? Some form of accountability is required, here, and we hope that it becomes stable in the coming days. And I'd also like to, to talk about security, as we were told by the Chief of Defense Staff, also from the news yesterday.
It's the Chief of Army Staff.
The Chief of Army Staff, right. Talking about Niger State, Kaduna. He didn't want to say much about Zamfara State, but we need more clarity. Yes, indeed, it's important. It's very good that we have some form of assurance that those states are becoming stable, but we need more clarity, particularly in Niger State, where in Shiroro local government months ago, the army suffered a fatal fate, with the ambush that led to the death of about 36 officers in all. So what's happening in Shiroro local government? Has the army been able to rein in on the bandits in that area? Is it no longer a flashpoint? And more importantly, what are the people saying about security in that area? Kaduna is also another area. Berningwari local government, Zangon Kataf in southern Kaduna, the people also need to give feedback besides what the army is saying. Maukwe.
I'm totally on all fours with you on that, but also listening to the Chief of Army Staff and the confidence which he espoused, you could tell that it would seem that the military have been paying close attention to these areas that you've mentioned and look like they are on top of the situation. And that's why he's talking about stability. I think he's not saying that it's been eradicated just yet, but as you've said, further questions need to be asked. And it'll be very interesting to know if the military will be willing to take more questions. I want to believe that they will be, because only recently we saw that the National Assembly invited the chiefs, the chiefs of the different chiefs. Yeah, the service chiefs, I was looking for that word, to the National Assembly. Initially, they had sent representatives, and the National Assembly, or the House of Representatives more specifically, was very clear that they did not want representatives. They wanted the service chiefs who had been appointed in those positions. So they allowed them speak generally and speak freely on certain issues, and then much later the doors were closed. We weren't privy to that. But naturally, the generality of Nigerians will want to be updated as to what precisely is happening in these areas of concern. And sadly, the issue of Zamfara, which came up in that conversation, where the Chief of Army Staff was saying, oh, well, we are not politicians, we don't take any sides in politics, but some of the conversations and opinions that they read in the media also form a part of how they fine-tune their own operations. So what part have they taken into consideration with regards to what is going on in Zamfara State is a matter of concern. Before now, some of the reports that we had gotten was that it was seen that there was some kind of arrangement between the citizens and the bandits. So during daytime, citizens are allowed to operate, but anytime from 5, 6, it was seen that, if you were a wise citizen, and you wanted your own life, it mattered to you, you simply left the streets for the bandits. Is that still the situation in Zamfara? So it'll be very interesting to get very clear perspectives and updates on these areas which the Chief of Army Staff has spoken on. But then the situation in Kano, certainly Kayode, I mean, with all that you have said, and also Bukola, with regards to the instructions that the police was given the fact that they knew that they were dealing with a volatile situation. You cannot stifle people, from protesting. It is their right. It is one of the rights that we enjoy in a democracy. What must happen is that people must be allowed to express this without it getting violent. So, as you've said, what precisely is the instruction that came to the police as a result of the instruction that they had passed earlier that they would not be allowing protests? Why would they say that they would not be allowing protests? Why are people not allowed to gather? Is this no longer a democracy? And when they do, is it within the purview of the police to use firearms on protesting citizens? That certainly cannot be the way to go, cannot be the modus operandi. So we need to know if we're learning any lessons from what we've seen so far. Don't forget, NSAS happened just a few years back, and we're still trying to pick up the lessons from that particular protest. I want to believe that the police is not hard of hearing. Reforms are inevitable. When citizens protest, it is their duty to protect citizens and to ensure that they're able to express themselves as freely as possible. Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to ask a question. When this protest, because yes, we've talked about Kano, and every time there's a matter, there's an election or one issue or the other that has to do between leadership and the people. See the people on the streets protesting. Yes, indeed, you've spoken already. You cannot stifle the people from airing their views or from protesting. It's their right to protest. Now, what they're saying is, are you listening? You're listening to what they're saying. But the focus should now be more on why are they protesting? What is the reason behind the protest? Is someone asking that question? Is that being looked at? Because this protest, some will say, is one too many, but it continues to be like a recurring decimal. So we need to ask the question, why are the people protesting? Can we ensure that this reason, if it is the same reason why they're protesting, can we ensure that that is taken care of? I mean, the president, in presenting his budget, talked about the 2024 budget, talked about focus on human capital development. They're going to focus on human capital development. Practically everything in that budget talks about the human being, the Nigerian, moving the Nigerian forward, moving the nation forward. Can leadership step back a bit and have conversations with the people and ask the people exactly what do you want? And it's not enough to just sit back and do a document and say, okay, this is what it is. And no, we're not going to allow you to protest. We're not going to allow you to speak. What do the people want to say? Would you even listen to them and then begin to tailor out your leadership so that it will benefit the people, so that they will see that the leadership, what you're planning to do, is for their own good? Is it possible to begin to look at things from that angle? And the area of security, well done. Kudos to the security agencies and all that they're doing. Let's hope that at the end of the day, and that will be real soon, that day will come real soon, will end real quick, we'll see an end to insecurity in Nigeria and see normalcy returned to the different parts of this country where they've had challenges with insecurity. But having said that, let's look at what the papers have to say about everything that we've talked about now and many more. And I'll start out with the Vanguard newspaper. And they lead with the budget, 2024 budget. Tinubu seeks NAS approval for 27.5 trillion naira. That's how they captioned that story. Declares security, job creation, poverty reduction, top priorities. I talked about that. It's about human capital, the human beings in Nigeria. As it says, Nigeria's greatest wealth is her people. Says students' loan will commence January 2024. Oil price pegged at 77.96 per barrel. Production 1.78 million barrels per day. Pegs exchange rate at 7.50 to the dollar. You have to go through quite a number of things there. Akpabio says Appropriation Act takes effect from January 1, 2024. We will ensure it reflects principles of accountability, inclusiveness. That is credited to the President of the Senate, Senator Akpabio. Why budget must improve service delivery and development, coming from the Speaker. Well, just go on to page 5. You see all the breakdown of that story and more details, but you see the picture below that of the President laying the budget before NAS. And someone asked the question, says, how is it that every time the President wants to do this, everybody comes, surrounds him, and we don't get to see him actually do it? You see the people all around him, but we don't see the process of laying the document before the National Assembly. But that's what you see in that picture there. And recapitalization. Nigeria needs bigger banks for $1 trillion economy. NDIC. So how do we get the bigger banks? You know, but that conversation is one that I think we need to go into at some point. The banks in Nigeria, how are they operating? Are they there? You hear all the profits they declare at the end of each financial year, and you wonder, where are they getting? How are they able to get these huge profits? Is it the surcharges they're charging that the people are having to bear? Is that adding to the profits of the banks? Come on. But we need clarity someday. Somehow we'll see an openness in our
you want
banks.
them to tell you their business secrets?
No, it's not about the business secrets. But then this one, Supreme Court okays indefinite use of old new bank notes. Well, check page 9 for that. And then this one, FG begs core members over deplorable NYSC camps. Again, you find that on page 9. It's a Thursday, and they're talking money here, Mr. and Mrs. So let's just go there. It says, that's what men are good at. When they make money, their mistresses enjoy the bulk while their wives get the short end of the stick. And Mr. responds, if you take it easy, you don't have any business with sticks. I'll give you a pull. Well, that's it from the Vanguard newspaper.
Well, no comments. New Telegraph is the one that I'm looking at for you this morning. Very interesting stories, apart from the very obvious ones. Renewed Hope Budget. Tinubu presents 27.5 trillion naira proposal to lawmakers. Prioritizes security, job creation, poverty reduction. Budget proposal deceitful. That's according to the PDP. So, says rendition of Tinubu's campaign tune in NAS sacrilegious. Okay, so looks like the politics isn't over yet. 1.78 million barrels per day oil estimate feasible. That's according to Impeachment. So it looks like it's something that they think they can do. Pages 258 and 26 will give you the details. They also have a highlight for you in the box right there. And at least this is some proactiveness on the part of government. And judiciary is a part of government. It's an arm of government. So old notes remain legal tender beyond December 31. That's according to the Supreme Court. So no need to fret. If you have lots of the old notes and none of the new ones, it's okay to keep spending. So says the Supreme Court. And I think the CBN has adjusted accordingly. You also have these stories. So some focus on the subnationals. 2024, works, education, health. Top of Owore's 714.4 billion naira budget. The story is on page 3. About this time, while a lot of focus is on the federal government, we should also be focusing on the subnationals, the states. What are they doing? Are they submitting their own proposals as well? Where are their own priority areas? Don't forget, the president also is looking to work with subnationals to see how they can optimize certain areas of cooperation. You also have this here, 800 litigations. Wike discards FCTA lawyers, hires 24 SANs, defends 61.6 billion naira 2023 supplementary budget. The story is on page 26 of the paper. Usually, the budget the president presents on behalf of the federal government also contains that of the FCT as well. Because don't forget that the legislators make laws for the FCT. INEC dares FCT's Park and Pay Company, removes signposts. So, that story is very interesting, and we in Abuja know why. There needs to be some clarity. Has it been reintroduced? What exactly is the policy around Park and Pay, and which are the areas that are going to be involved? And this is very important because it is the residents who will explain to visitors, and Abuja from time to time gets a lot of visitors for different reasons. I mean, investors, people coming in for different occasions, etc., etc. So page 3 will be a very important read to you inside New Telegraph. Ondo, Ayedatiwa to preside over EXCO meeting. Tinubu Assembly violate Constitution on resignation. Somebody certainly speaking there, pages 3 and 29 we'll give you details. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph. New Telegraph.
And turn next to The Guardian, which focuses on an entirely different subject matter for its lead story. And here it is. COP28 summit. Again, Nigeria, others negotiate right to just transition. And there you have it, an infographic that tells the story. Carbon emissions per capita by country. And you have China, the US, and India, and quite a number of other countries. We hope that there's a consensus this time around, because the difference in carbon emissions is just as different as the outcomes of discussions year in, year out. And right under that, you have what happens to be the big story from the federal capital yesterday. Knox applause as Tinubu presents 27.5 trillion naira budget of renewed hope. How much hope is contained in that budget size? We'll have that discussion soon. And there's also a number of other stories. On the right-hand corner of the paper, there's this one: fulfill your stance on federalism, Afenifere tells Tinubu. And it's a page 5 read, just in case you're wondering, in what areas is the socio-political group carpeting or demanding some form of accountability of the president. And under that is this that is just as interesting, albeit, a departure from politics. 14% Nigerian women experience physical violence. It's page 4 read. And lastly, provide 535.8 billion naira school feeding details, court orders minister. That's also a page 4 read from The Guardian newspaper. Let's leave it there for The Guardian this morning.
We'll take a look at Daily Trust. 2024 fiscal year, security gets lion's share as Tinubu presents 27.5 trillion naira budget. Well, maybe the lion in the IGP would leap for joy at this one, because security is getting lion's share. But the writers tell more. This recurrent takes 18.51 trillion, capital 8.7 trillion. President wants proposals passed in 1 month. Now, this is a major part of this story, and I look forward to see how the National Assembly will ensure that they're rigorous, meticulous, and of course try to meet this timeline that the president has given. More riders for you, but we'll be delving into that during the course of the program this morning.
Let's just add to that, be seen to be meticulous, not just meticulous.
There you go. So it's different angles to that one. So we'll keep our eyes on that one. And as I said, we'll be delving deep into that. But a very sad one at the bottom of the front page of the Daily Trust: 25 killed, 15 injured in Kwara Road crash. Really sad one. We need to pay attention to our roads, what caused this accident, but our hearts and prayers are with the families of those who lost their lives. Just one more for you as we exit the Daily Trust. Abuja flight diversion to Asaba. Controversy as dispatchers, controllers disagree. So what's going on here? Well, more details on the inside pages. Let's leave it there for the Daily Trust.
And turn next to the Nigerian Observer, which takes a detour from national budget to state budgets this morning. And it looks at a number of states in the South. FG, Bayelsa, Delta present 2024 appropriation bills. Earlier on, we heard that Delta is proposing over 700 billion naira 2024 budget. That's a record size. There's just one more story. Well, a few others. This one is beside the nameplate. EFCC calls for witnesses against former CBN governor. Page 2 is where you'll find details of that story. Of course, we heard that he failed to meet his bail conditions from a few days ago. And lastly, nuclear power development gets boost as Nigeria, others receive Atomic Agency's green light. That's a page 2 read. Let's leave it there for the Nigerian Observer, and I believe that also sums it up on our newspaper review segment. We'll be back in just a moment when we begin to unpack what we have for you today. Stay with us.
The president makes his way into the chamber of the National Assembly amidst exchange of pleasantries with lawmakers who are already seated for a special joint session. It is President Bola Tinubu's first presentation of the appropriation bill to the National Assembly since he assumed office in May this year. President of the Senate as well as the Speaker of the House of Representatives welcome President Tinubu, who thereafter takes his seat as the President of the Senate opens the session with his remarks.
This is a significant milestone in our nation's journey towards progress and development. The presentation of the budgetary estimates sets the course for our nation's fiscal policies and priorities for the coming year.
The 2024 appropriation bill, pegged at 27.5 trillion naira, is based on some key economic assumptions, including oil price benchmark of $77 per barrel, with projected oil production capacity of 1.78 million barrels per day, an exchange rate of 750 naira to a dollar, a GDP growth rate of 3.76%, a 21.4% inflation rate. Although the government expects to generate 18 trillion naira in revenue, the deficit stands at 9 trillion naira. President Tinubu begins his 2024 budget presentation tagged Budget of Renewed Hope by highlighting his policy focus, excluding the sectoral breakdown of allocation of the 27.5 trillion naira estimates.
Despite the global headwind, the Nigerian economy has proven resilient, maintaining moderate but positive growth over the past 12 months. Inflation has trended upward, yes, due to the weak global conditions. To contain this rising domestic prices, we will ensure effective coordination of fiscal and monetary policy measures and collaborate with subnational governments to address structural factors driving in inflation in Nigeria. The budget proposal meets our goal of completing critical infrastructure projects, which will help address structural problems in the economy by lowering the cost of doing business for companies and the cost of living for average person.
If the aspiration of the $1 trillion GDP economy in less than 10 years is to be achieved, the president believes the fundamentals and security should be fixed.
Defense and internal security are recorded top priority. The internal security architecture will be overhauled to enhance law enforcement capabilities and safeguard lives, property, and investment across the country. Human capital is the most critical resource of national development. Accordingly, the budget prioritizes human development with particular attention to children, the foundation of our nation.
The fiscal policy estimates, according to the president, will leverage on innovation, collaboration, and more.
A critical focus of this budget and the medium-term expenditure framework is Nigeria's commitment to greener future. Emphasizing public-private partnership, we have strategically made provision to leverage private capital for big-ticket infrastructure projects in energy, transportation, and other sectors.
He then lays the appropriation bill before the legislators. The Speaker of the House of Representatives commends the audacious policy posture of the president and promises him of legislative support.
The National Assembly will support the government policies and programs targeted at alleviating poverty, economic restructuring and diversification, as well as social sector reform and developments.
The 2024 appropriation bill, as presented by President Tinubu, provides a guide for the 2024 fiscal year in line with his renewed hope agenda to meet the yearnings of Nigerians.
And that's where we'll start up from, the focus on the budget presented by the President at the National Assembly yesterday. There's been multiple reactions, and some are wondering that statement of the President that the economy indeed has been modest in growth, but positively so, and that the focus will be on human capital development. Our guest already in the studio was actually nodding when the President talked about the focus on the children. We'll start off from there. We have Mr. Bukka Kiari, former chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, here in our studio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So let's start off from that point where you were nodding your head when you heard the President say the human capital development, I mean, it's the greatest asset Nigeria has. He said that over and over again, but he talked about particular focus on the children.
Indeed. For a nation to thrive and grow, you need to invest in human capital. The hard infrastructure is given. It's absolutely necessary. But the soft infrastructure, which is actually the brains, or is the most critical of all of our investments. I mean, the data is out there that we have the largest number of out-of-school children, and that basically is a ticking time bomb. If the security situation today is bad, 10, 15 years from now, it's going to be worse. So that needs to be addressed. Of course, we need to see the sectoral allocation of the budget to see if we have set aside anything above 10% of the budget to education. And that would tell the people that the government is serious in addressing the issue of education.
Yeah, but when you look generally at the presentation of the budget and the President's focus, I mean, when you listen to his speech yesterday, the budget has been titled a budget of renewed hope. Do you look to 2024 with hope?
There is hope in the sense that when one looks at the numbers compared to the last 2 or 3 budgets, there is a meaningful progress. What do I mean by that? You look at the deficit, for example. In absolute terms, the deficit is about 8 trillion naira versus 13 trillion this year, 2023. When you look at the capital expenditure as a percentage of the total budget, it is higher. Now, we are still in a deficit situation, which means that the borrowing amounts are going to be there, and how the debt service numbers are high. However, compared to the previous year, which is 2023, it's a meaningful progress. Now, some of the assumptions might be difficult. Realistic assumption for oil price, that's fine. So about $78 per barrel. Right now it's trending around 80. Some analysts are even predicting higher numbers going down for the rest of the next 3 to 6 months. The other thing is the production volume, which is put at about 1.8 million barrels per day. That is achievable. It's not just the volume of production, but it is also the theft, which needs to be addressed head on. And I see some moves made in the last few weeks or few months. And if that is addressed, then we should see our production go higher. Those would make some of these assumptions stand. And the revenue collections and revenue leakages need to also be addressed. I believe that the chairman of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, had also remarked on certain things that the committee is doing, and that may also give us, either in the short or medium term, the blockage of leakages by automating and digitizing processes. So, in a nutshell, I would call this a budget, or the resetting of the macro policies of the country. We've been going in with a lot of fiscal rascality, for lack of a better phrase. We have been having a lot of, depressing numbers with higher inflation, et cetera, But I think this is the beginning of change, if you will, of the economy.
You know, in his speech, the president talked about improving effectiveness of the budget performance. If you look at what's happened in the 2023 budget, yes, it's not his budget, but what do you think, and following the trend, the budgets have not performed as expected over time? Would there be a difference? I mean,
exactly. Effectiveness is that we need to make sure that we are monitoring the implementation of the budget as quickly as tightly as possible. The era of doing too many supplementary budgets ought to stop, because it means that you haven't planned properly. Of course, as things go on and things might change, and therefore you could address those issues. Even in corporate world, there is that tendency, but it is significant changes in the macro that would make you go back and reset your budget. Now, here in the case of Nigeria, it has been consistently doing it, in which case even the budget itself, when it's presented, the follow-through becomes difficult, and people just keep shoving additional spendings, and that may actually make the managing of the budget from the side of the presidency difficult, because what you need to have is that once the budget has been planned and presented, I think the various MDAs need to keep close monitoring in the execution of the budget. And at the end of the day, that will also engender confidence from the point of view of foreign investors and our multilateral international partners, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a good practice for us to have a disciplined execution of our budget.
And it'll be interesting to see how that is done in the days to come, because shortly after the president gave the speech at the National Assembly and spoke of the general areas which his administration intends to focus on, poverty reduction is one of them, internal security, and job creation. I'm sure that this certainly was music to the ears of those, not just in the public sector, but also in the private sector, because if jobs are going to happen, they're going to come largely from the private sector. And then when you look in the president's speech, there's an area where he says, emphasizing public-private partnerships, we have strategically made provisions to leverage private capital for big-ticket infrastructure projects in energy, transportation, and other sectors. That part stood out for me, and I've been wondering, looking at our history with how we've collaborated with the private sector and the mixed results that we've received in those areas, how successful do you think that we will be, or that the government will be, in trying to leverage leverage private capital in terms of these areas that they're looking at?
It's music to my ears as a major player in the private sector, when I see government actually even bringing in conversation that says PPP is absolutely critical, even in critical areas such as power or energy. It means that the government is saying there is limited resources as far as the government purse is concerned. However, if you make it such that there is an opportunity for the private sector to come in and invest, then, we may end up beginning to catalyze our economy for growth. I am of the opinion that it might take more than a year to reset what had happened in the past. And so the 2024 budget should be the beginning of that conversation. Maybe in a couple of years, so by 2025, the reset should have been completed, and then going forward thereafter, we may go into a growth trajectory. Now, some people would feel that that might be a bit prolonged, that the sooner we do this, the better for us.
Yes, but I mean, addressing it headlong, I mean, it is interesting that you are saying this more on the long term, and this is budget 2024.
Correct.
But I'm wondering, looking at how public-private partnerships have worked in our recent history, how optimistic are you that government will be able to get it right from the foundation this time around, given the mixed results we've seen so far?
I'm tying it into what Mr. President said during the ministerial retreat, meaning that there would be KPIs, there would be goals and objectives, and things would be, critically and seriously looked at and monitored. Now, if you marry that to this budget and the budget's performance or effectiveness, then, the rational expectation is to see an implementation. And if private-public partnership is one of such objectives, then that need to be put in the front burner.
Which models would you say we should explore more? I mean, which ones would you say have given the best results? The government should leverage more on, or these are the models that they should copy more of or replicate more of?
I mean, we've seen it with the telecoms industry. We've seen where it was a monopoly run by government to where it is now more or less privately run. And the efficiency, even though when we first had it in 2001, August or thereabouts, when MTN issued the first few 100,000 lines, price per minute was extremely exorbitant. Today, it has crashed down to a meaningful thing. In fact, nobody can do any business without the telecom involvement as a channel of delivery, as a channel for payment, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we can do the same with many of the things where government is in control of, whether it is the rail or energy, and even in the energy, the entire energy value chain, from generation, transmission to distribution, all of those need to be privatized, well capitalized, and the requirements for capital in those industries should then be the job of the regulatory agencies or agency involved, and thereby confidence by the private sector would bring in the capital in rolling out those. And it's a critical infrastructure.
I thought the electricity sector had already been privatized as well.
Well, the only element that is, the only element that has been privatized is the distribution. Transmission is still not quite fully privatized.
True.
Generation, even at the generation level, only a few private sector are generating. The ones that you see, the larger projects, are still government contracts. So if those could also be done very quickly and then bring in private parties to be in the ownership structure, I think it would bode well for us.
Mr. Kerry, I know that we're not discussing the electricity sector, but the private partnership, the public-private partnership model that the president's talked about is something that they're going to push at immensely. But then some will say, as it is, even the part of the electricity sector that's been privatized, so to speak, the desired effect is not being seen because according to the speculation that it wasn't properly done and it has to be revisited. So if the president's talking about emphasizing the public-private partnerships model for the country and for development, basically in this 2024 that we're going into, what do you think needs to be changed vis-a-vis what happened in the electricity sector and what they're looking to?
The thing about it is that in some instances we may need to talk more. There should be transparency in the transaction, in the conversations and in the engagement. There is also need to have periodic milestones that need to be communicated to the public. I mean, a power sector, going into that, to do 1,000 megawatt or a 500 megawatt plant, it takes time. But so for the gestation period or during the period of pregnancy, nothing would be seen. However, if at the end of the day, there are things that can be shared with the public and the expectations met, then we would be fine. The other element is actually what Mr. President had said, which is that the PPP arrangement need to be looked at, and we need to fast-track some of the low-hanging fruits. And if we can do that, then those few successes will give us the momentum to catalyze growth in the various sectors.
Let's go back to this budget here and again weigh it against the 2023 budget as it is. So in 2023, it appears as at September 2023, the federal government retained its revenue target was exceeded as at September 2023. Now, if we go by this and what the target is, if we get the graphics on the screen, what they are targeting for revenue in 2024, is there a guarantee that we'll be able to achieve that? You talked about the realistic nature of the benchmarks.
Correct. Correct.
Do you think we'll be able to reach that mark?
I believe with the revenue side of the equation, it's possible to meet that target.
Sorry. Okay. That allocation expenditure, we're talking about the revenue.
The revenue side. This is the allocation.
This is allocation. We'll get back to this soon. So,
in terms of the revenue, I think this year's revenue targets have been met or nearly met, about 97% or thereabouts. Now, the way we are looking at this is that the assumption is oil production, and it's possible to hit that 1.8 million barrels. Now, and the pricing looks right. The other elements are not. But so the revenue generation could happen, especially with the privatization component, even though it is small, it's a percent of total revenue. I think there should be more emphasis on that in terms of privatization revenue generation, because I believe it is less than ₦1 trillion, but we could do more, somewhere around 0.3 trillion or 0.4 trillion. We could do more because those in firms or those entities in private hands tend to become more efficient and generate more opportunity for revenue to the government in terms of taxes and revenues long-term than in the immediate. So it is a way of investing, if you will, quote unquote, our capital in that regard. So the revenue generation is a bit realistic.
Yeah, some people say maybe a little too realistic. They wanted it a bit more ambitious. They think that, I mean, I just speaking with an analyst yesterday on our program, The News at 10, and he thought, look, why is the projected production of crude oil still hovering around 1.78? He thinks it should be in the region of at least 2 million barrels per day. You agree with him?
I do agree. We can do more. I mean, especially with the strong possibility of the Dangote refinery coming on stream during the course of the year, early part of the year, I understand. We need to be more aggressive with oil production, blockage of the leakage, and also gas, which I think has not been discussed because this is the train number 7 or train 7 of the NLNG need to also come into stream because that is what one would call a transitional energy source for the green economy. You know, so,
which the president also specifically mentioned. As a matter of fact, is going to Dubai now for the COP summit. But I'm wondering how that is going to eventually feature in our budget. I mean, he has very ambitious plans. When you look at what he said as we approach the COP28 climate summit, a pivotal moment for global climate action, have directed relevant government agencies to diligently work towards securing substantial funding commitments that will bolster Nigeria's energy transition. So it is something that he's certainly considering. Right. But I'm looking at some of the other parameters now. You've agreed that it ought to have been a little more ambitious in terms of, production of crude oil. But crude oil still seems largely to be the major source of revenue, despite all of the other ambitious things that we've heard. Solid Minerals saying, look, if we get our game right, we should not be we should not be borrowing the money anywhere. But it doesn't look to be featuring very prominently in terms of one of the areas we're looking to be getting our revenues from. Is it an oversight, or are we just being very cautious about it?
I believe as a nation we need to be purposeful and deliberate. We need to be purposeful and deliberate on some of the few things that we've been talking about and dancing around without necessarily jumping ourselves into it, which is that the diversification of the revenue source, not the diversification of the GDP, because if you look at the GDP, oil and gas as a component is around 8 to 9% max, which means that the economy is diverse. Agric is around 10 or 12%. However, the revenue that government extracts from those other sectors is not comparable to the oil and gas. Therefore, there has to be a meaningful way of addressing those issues. So the value chain need to be fully developed. Private sector need to get involved. And even within the agri space, once it leaves the farm gate, there should be some revenue possibilities down the road in terms of the processing and the selling of the finished goods. And the same with solid minerals. Solid minerals, I think, had been, it has become so fragmented such that states, local authorities have not been carried along from the center. And what we need is an integrated approach such that whatever we produce need to be, known, for lack of a better word.
Accountability.
Exactly. So we have to make it accountable. And it is from that the value extraction will begin to happen in terms of taxation and levies and what have you. So those are some of the critical elements, because if we look at that, we can do what some other smaller economies have done in the solid minerals arena. Yeah.
Our colleagues in Lagos have a couple of questions. Ready?
Yes, thank you, Nyota. Good morning, Mr. Booker. Besides solid minerals and the other areas, earlier in the year, particularly in the second quarter, the FIRS was celebrated for surpassing its projected revenue target at 5.5 trillion naira. And we don't know what has been, brought in the last quarter of the year. So if that's the requisite amount there, that means that there's a huge potential, for maybe not hitting the 18 trillion naira revenue projection in the budget, but there's a huge potential there, and all the other sectors that have been created as a result of the expansion of the cabinet. Shouldn't we be more optimistic in that regard, where revenue projection is concerned for the 2024 budget?
I think one of I believe that what we need to look at is that as economic activities also begin to pick up, I believe that maybe not in the first half of 2024, but down the road, economic activities will pick up. What I mean by that is that the inflation rate of inflation increase is slowing down. So that means that we're seeing somewhere turning around, maybe by January, maybe February. But at the same time, some of the production at the economic levels may begin to pick up. Now, there would be so many assumptions going into that. I wouldn't believe that the 3.7 or thereabouts in the budget assumption may come to pass. But even if it is at a 3% rate, GDP growth rate, there would be more activities and therefore possibilities at the for FIRS to collect more in taxes. Now, the other element, of course, is the royalties from the production, if we can block those leakages. I think as a line item, that might be a higher number than even the FIRS receipts, even though the FIRS receipts over the last few years have been improving despite the strong headwinds we are facing as a nation. So in a nutshell, it's actually something that one would say it's to be seen if FIRS could meet the target for 2024. I believe that the 2023 target would probably be achieved based on what we have seen so far.
And if it is achieved, let's also look at government activity on a larger scale. What's the promise of prudence and accountability in the area of fiscal responsibility, particularly with regards to the cabinet size of this government, which is beyond what we've seen in the past? The wage bill also what's the promise of prudence in the management of funds for the budget in 2024?
Yeah, as a nation, we must actually look at the possibility of becoming or having what I call fiscal competitiveness. And that one requires that, one has to do a benchmark with similar economies. And for us, that has to be seen very seriously. The fiscal side of things have gone to the dogs, pardon my French. And we need to reverse the trend. And I think we would start not just with the number of ministers or whatever, but actually even the spending we are doing. We need to look at it and make sure that we're not wasting our resources. And I think if we go through the whole spending, even on the recurrent side, particularly even capital spending, and redefine some of those, we may end up being a bit more prudent and be more efficacious in that whatever naira we spend should be generating return or reducing costs. So essentially, our work is cut out for us. I mean, on the side of the presidency, because that is where the bulk of the spending is going to rest, and we need to look at that critically.
And we hope that officials in the administration are reflecting on that. Let's look at, some of the projections of the president in the budget, which he says that it will achieve a job-rich economic growth rate and poverty reduction. Those are the areas that he is prioritizing in the budget. So what partnerships, besides looking at the private sector, what partnerships can we begin to expect from relevant ministries, i.e. the Ministry of Labor and Employment, Poverty Alleviation, such that we can see that these areas of focus can transform the economy? What partnerships should we expect in that regard?
I think it cuts across many other ministries, because labor is more of a custodian of those aspects whereby you would be reporting the data and so on and so forth, and engagement with various entities within the economy. But I think the most significant things that we should be looking at is the aggregate value chain. How can we unleash and capture value and generate more opportunities and more jobs? The micro, small, and medium enterprises growth. What can we do to ensure that micro, small, and medium enterprises grow? Because you see, when small and medium enterprises are growing, they are in the millions. I believe the last data I saw, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 20 million micro, small, and medium enterprises. If only 20% of them would be adding one additional person because there is growth, then you would be generating millions of jobs. They may still be low-paying jobs, but in either service or direct labor, that would be another catalyst. Manufacturing, we need to actually go back to what I call light manufacturing, because that may be also another area where we will generate a lot of jobs. And a few other factors affect manufacturing in Nigeria, which is energy is one of them. Some of the policy pronouncements is another. Fair and competitive laws and policies would also be a catalyst for that. The other element is in the entertainment industry, which is actually going whether government does anything or not, and also in the tech space. This is where the Minister of Digital Economy had made, unveiled his strategic posture, or the strategic steps. Those are all catalysts for job creation. And in some cases, those jobs may actually be outside coming in, meaning in an outsourced nature. And therefore, all of those pieces put together may begin to show the job creation angle to the economy.
And that is what the people want to see, job creation, how to ensure that prices are brought down, reduction in inflation, so that we can all smile, not just to the bank, but to the markets. But we'll take a break now, Mr. Kearin. When we return, we'll talk about how to ensure that the people feel this budget and actively participate in the process as well. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.
Sells the event of the year. Some call it Black Friday, Africans call it Kunga.
When you shop every day like it's a holiday, discount the prices so sharp all you want on. Black Friday like you've never seen before. Then you go all I say, thank God it's Yakata.
Kunga Yakata from 1st till 30th of November 2023. Genuine products are cheaper at Kunga.
We are passionate about two things in Nigeria. The first is football. The second is our rice. And nobody celebrates like a Nigerian. So, for every goal scored, every mark made, you can be sure to always come back home to rice. Celebrate with Nigerian Premium Big Bull Rice. Homegrown just like you. Big Bull Rice. Tasty rice. Nourished you. We are passionate about two things in Nigeria. The first is football. The second is our rice. And nobody celebrates like a Nigerian. So, for every goal scored, every mark made, you can be sure to always come back home to rice. Celebrate with Nigerian Premium Big Bull Rice. Homegrown just like you. Big Bull Rice. Tasty rice. Nourished you.
Discover Lipton's flavorful and balanced taste. We pick fine quality tea leaves from selected tea gardens around the world to give you Lipton Yellow Label's flavorful and balanced taste in every sip. Who's your guy? Now Olumide Apata. See how sweet they like beans and rice. Labour Party, I will never leave your side. I will never ever. I dedicate my time forever. Time to you, my people. Even if the road be rough, I know mine. 'Cause together we shall stand. Labour Party, who's your guy? Now Olumide Apata. See how sweet they like beans and rice. 'Cause together we shall.
President Bola Tinubu's 2024 budget proposals struck a responsive chord for many of these legislators at the joint session who believe.
The Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning gives a breakdown of the proposals. The Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Mr. Wale Adum, give more insights on the assumptions in the budget and explains why the federal government wants to reduce borrowing.
In order to stabilize the Nigerian economy for rapid inclusive growth, there is going to be less reliance on borrowing. The budget deficit is being brought down from about over 6%, 6.1% of GDP to 3.88% of GDP. That's a huge change in direction from unlimited and limitless borrowing to focusing on revenue, expenditure management, to give value for money with expenditure and to raise revenue.
The Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Mr. Atiku Bagudu, presents the sectoral breakdown of the budget. According to the Minister, defense and security, education, health, infrastructure and social development and poverty reduction are the top 5 allocations. The debt servicing is expected to go up 9.18 trillion naira. The minister explains that the budget is designed to address fiscal challenges and improve domestic economic situations.
The budget that was presented today to the National Assembly, and I believe was well received by the National Assembly and Nigerians, has been prepared against the backdrop of continuing global and domestic challenges. Overall fiscal risks have increased following weaker than expected domestic economy performance and structural issues in the domestic economy.
A review of the 2023 budget reveals that only 25% of the capital budget has been released as of September 2023. Mr. Ben Akabweze gives further insight into the plans of the new administration.
This is a transition year. We're transiting from one president to another. The last time we had a transition year like that was 2015. In 2015, the budget was not presented until actually mid-December. So 1 month later than we are doing even now.
The administration is hoping that the budget will meet the expectations of Nigerians and improve the nation's gross domestic product. Benny Ark, Channels Television News.
Welcome back to the program. Let's continue with our conversation. Mr. Bukka Kyari, former chairman of NESG, still with us as we take a deep dive into the budget proposal for 2024, which the president laid before the National Assembly yesterday. Thank you for staying with us, Mr. Kyari. For a lot of Nigerians, this may be business as usual, even though for this government, it's trying to perhaps achieve something different. In fact, with the presentation of the budget, we saw it done differently. The president gave his speech, and the ministers of finance and budget, they had their breakdown session elsewhere, which is a departure from what we've seen in previous times. So this is different, but let's speak to how the Nigerian people receive this and how we ensure that this budget at least improves their livelihood. The good thing again is that we've seen state governments also laying their budgets, and in recent times we've seen a lot of attention being paid to how states are spending funds. Lagos State, you might recall that controversy around funds allocated to buses, vehicles, and the rest. And looking at what Nigerians have said across board, a lot of them still believe, well, the budget is padded anyway. The politicians and people in government will allocate a large chunk to themselves, and they do not see anything different with this budget. How do we begin to turn this tide around? Should we look into that budget and see funds still allocated to exotic vehicles, lots of funds allocated to feeding, and all of those, well, seemingly exorbitant things? Would you say that Nigerians should expect anything different from this particular budget?
I think I need to study the sectoral allocation. But for me, I would like to see an emphasis on education, because sooner or later that can have a transformative powers. And the same thing at the subnational levels, meaning all the states. Ordinarily, the state's capital expenditure as a percent of the total spending ought to be above 50% for most states, or all of them, incidentally. Because the lower you go at the government's tiers, the more capital spending should be allocated as a percent of total spending. So if federal total capital expenditure is about 30 or so percent, states ought to be around 50 and local governments ought to be around 60. Now, that's just me saying that the budgets at the subnational levels ought to be spent on things that one would call investments. Now, unfortunately, things such as buying vehicles are considered capital. In some parts of Africa, even a country like Botswana, they don't consider those as capital spending, even though accounting-wise it is. They look at education, healthcare, and some of the basic infrastructure as capital spending. So essentially what you do is that there are certain things that have a direct correlation to the average lives of the citizens. And those are the things that we need to unbundle. Transparency in not only the allocation, but in where the spendings go is absolutely critical. And then we also need the NGOs, entities such as Budget IT and the likes to also, amplify the spendings that we are, that our governments are doing. And in that instance, over time, we will see an improvement in allocation, but also in the execution and in the decisions and choices whereby we need to favor our own. So if it is vehicles that are going to be purchased, are those vehicles manufactured or assembled in Nigeria? If they are, then it means that there are some effects of creating jobs here or sustaining jobs here. So I think that conversation is going to be an ongoing conversation, and all stakeholders need to be involved in that conversation in general.
Well, we'll look forward to that. I think it was in that presentation by the ministers that it was mentioned that people can actually monitor and track the budget. Certain iMonitor application in the budget monitor application, which, by the way, I've tried to get that, but I have not been able to get that. So again, there's a huge question mark around that. If we want the people to actively participate and be transparent, then we need to ensure the tools are not just there, but they are working. But speak to us about the private sector, because the president said that, the private sector will be taking on big ticket infrastructure, talked about energy. I know you've talked about that, but there's something that, caught my attention. The CBN governor in his CIBN speech talked about poor service delivery from the public sector. And we're asking the private sector to partner with the public sector, but we still see that the public sector largely carries on with that anyhowness, if I can use that expression. I mean, not all of them, but you find out that a large chunk of them still have that mentality. I mean, it is government work, okay? We'll ensure that you sort us before we let you pass. People want to fix roads, and you see local governments standing in their way, and they say, well, we're trying to fix this road for the people. So is there a way around this anyhowness? So at least the intentions of the president in this budget will be achieved.
Indeed, I think the key to it is in reorienting or reorientation of the public sector in terms of service delivery. I know that there is something called Servicom. I don't know if they've been successful or if they have actually even come out and shared with us, the public, how effective they are as an entity. But generally speaking, from the point of view of a private sector player, you tend to see that, and you are pleasantly surprised when you get an engagement with a public sector that has professionalism, that delivers services to you, but they are few and far between. And I believe that that culture of service delivery or service quality need to be raised. And, there may be bright spots here and there, but I think overall it should be a complete culture of service delivery The other thing is that a public sector employee need to understand that they are there because of the citizens, and the service delivery matters. And that sort of orientation or mindset need to be inculcated in the average public sector employee.
Well, you know, lots of issues to unpack there, but because of time, I'd like to move to another point, which is quite vital. I think it was in the campaign manifesto, right, of now president, that he talked about a change in the approach to budgeting, that instead of, basing our budget largely on the dollar value of projected oil revenue, that he will seek to base our budgeting on the projected level of government spending instead. So sort of let us spend our way out of this, because he said rightfully that there are lots of challenges globally and of course locally. That was during campaigns. Now we've seen the budget size. The National Assembly raised issues about the size of our debts. There's, again, a lot of debate about that. Whether or not we're able to meet our projections is another thing, looking at the budget performance for 2023. Well, the year is not over, but so far it would look like we're not meeting those targets just yet. My question to you is that, are you concerned about the size of our debt? If you are, do you think that the government is then right to try to spend our way out of this, seeing that we'll keep incurring more debts, means we'll keep servicing more debts, and that will be pulling its weight on our expenditure and budgets?
The reality of the situation is that if you are going to do a meaningful budget for 2024, which is what Mr. President had presented yesterday, you have to have a deficit spending. Unless we have laws to codify and say that you must have surplus or you must have a budget that is balanced. I don't think Nigeria is ready for a balanced budget amendment, if you will. The critical piece with any budget that is oriented towards growth is that certain investments have to be made. And unfortunately, because of the situation we are in currently, you just have to spend your way with borrowings. But the borrowing has to be done efficaciously and efficiently. The spending ought to go into capital expenditure, which literally means that if you are getting the debt at reasonable rates and you are investing and the return on those investments are far higher than the debt services, then over a longer horizon, you would actually be in a position to service the debt. Now, looking at the revenue profile, and if we can block the leakages, we can do those things that we've mentioned earlier, then what one would see is the beginning of the reduction in the deficit levels as we go along. 6.11 2023% of GDP is the deficit. For 2024, it is projected at 3.88%. Now, that is a good trend if one year is considered a trend. So essentially, it means that by 2025 and thereafter, things would get better. But all of those is contingent on efficient spending. Unless you get that right, spending that would actually generate more, and the blockage of the leakages, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a combination of things, and all of those must be done efficiently for us to get ourselves out of the debt burden, so to speak. The debt level as a percent of GDP is not that high, but the debt service issue is where our problem lies.
And all of this, is targeted at growth, and the projected growth rate for 2024, according to the president in this budget, is 3.67%. And if we consider, what even global financial institutions had projected for Nigeria for 2024, there was no growth rate. There was 2.5, I believe, for 2023, but for 2024, there was zero growth projection. So how realistic is 3.67%, even if, you know, all of these things that you have projected are done by the administration? How realistic is 3.67%?
That's one of the things that I made comment on, which is that it may not necessarily be a possibility for us to hit 3.6% GDP growth. But if we can catalyze some of the activities and we also bring in quite a number of the informal sector into the formal sector, we may see a boost. It may not statistically be showing to us, but based on the revenue collections and some of the other nuances, we may see an improvement, possibly go up to around 3 or the low 3s, 3% GDP growth. So that's one of the issues I have with the assumptions.
So, Mr. Carey, there are a couple of things that we're almost out of time, but the president was quoted as saying, and if I could get that quote out, it says, to improve the effectiveness of our budget performance, the government will focus on ensuring value for money, greater transparency, and accountability, is the president's quote. It says, in this regard, we will work more closely with development partners and the private sector. Now you are very excited about that private sector bit. But the question is this other part where he says, money, value for money,
right,
greater transparency,
yes,
and accountability. Take that on one side, and then look at this. The parameters on which the budget was put together says domestic factors impacting the medium-term fiscal outlook include domestic revenue, mobilization challenges, public debt sustainability concerns, elevated inflation, challenging domestic business environment, all of these things. Take that again and weigh it against what he has said he wants to do. Transparency, accountability.
So the latter statement you made are the challenges we face. And then the way for us to get out of things is what he had mentioned, which is that there has to be transparency. There has to be, you know, what I've been calling it ROI, return on investment. That's the value for money part. And then be accountable to your actions. And that's why I was connecting it with the ministerial retreat. Because Mr. President had already given the marching orders, didn't he? That performance matters.
Yeah,
yes.
What are the concretes that you want to see as a result of this pronouncement?
We need to see a dashboard-like performance monitoring of all aspects of the budget or the objectives that the government wants to achieve. So we should be focused on the results or the outcomes rather than on the process itself. The process has already been laid out by Mr. President. And what then happens is that whether it's going to be on a quarterly basis, monthly might be too short a time period, there should be a review that says, how have we been doing against these promises we've made to the country?
A review with the Nigerian people.
Exactly. Yes.
All right. Mr. Carey, I was going to ask you the question about consequence management. Would the president punish his people if they go out of line? But we'll leave that for now. Thank you so much. Former chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, Mr. Bukka Carey, thank you for joining us for this conversation.
You're welcome.
Sunrise Daily will be back in a moment. Just stay with us.
passionate about two things in Nigeria. The first is football. The second is our rice. And nobody celebrates like a Nigerian. So, for every goal scored, every mark made, you can be sure to always come back home to rice. Celebrate with Nigerian Premium Big Bowl Rice, homegrown just like you. Big Bowl Rice, tasty rice, nourished you. We are passionate about two things in Nigeria. The first is football. The second is our rice. And nobody celebrates like a Nigerian. So, for every goal scored, every mark made, you can be sure to always come back home to rice. Celebrate with Nigerian Premium Big Bowl Rice, homegrown just like you. Big Bowl Rice, tasty rice, nourished you.
It's our biggest sales event of the year. Some call it Black Friday, Africans call it.
When you shop every day like it's a holiday, discount the prices so sharp all you want on. Black Friday like you've never seen before. Then you go all I say, thank God it's Yakata.
Kunga Yakata from 1st till 30th of November 2023. Genuine products are cheaper at Kunga.
Politically speaking, there are some states you always watch out for, and Edo is one of them. Today we turn our attention yet again to the build-up to the Edo 2024 governorship election. And as you can see, we have with us the Executive Director, Canvassers for Democracy and the Rule of Law, Mr. Olu Martins, joins us right here in our Lagos studios. Good to have you on the program.
Good morning, thank you. Good to be here.
Quite a number of issues have come out of Edo State, and for a lot of people, well, it's like a repeat, really. It's like a cycle you can almost predict, like a deja vu. But let's talk specifically about the deputy governor who has formally indicated his interest to succeed Governor Godwin Obaseki as governor of the state come next year. I mean, you are close to the governor. You're on his side, as it were. Tell us, is the governor excited about this?
First of all, you know, I'm a friend of the media simply because it was Patrick Henry that said, and I say this all the time, that the collective freedoms of a people, especially as a nation, can't be guaranteed until the actions and inactions of government is put in the public glare. You know, there are things that government would have wanted to do. But when the media brings it up, they will rescind their decision. So I would always doff my cap, in this case, in absentia, for the media, and especially for channels, because of the topical issues that you bring to the matter. The emotions of the governor is unnecessary. And the reason is because democracy is rightly defined as the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The governor is an individual, and he rightly has one vote. So how the governor feels about the declaration of his deputy, as far as I'm concerned, is immaterial, because he is an individual. He doesn't have to like it in a manner of speaking, because the deputy governor has a right, constitutionally speaking, you know, to aspire.
Is that to say he doesn't like it?
But that would not seem to be the case, Mr. Martins, because on the day of the declaration, the venue that the deputy governor wanted to use was somewhat...
I'll get to that.
That move was truncated.
Well, incidentally, when I was coming, the owner of that venue is a big fish, in a manner of speaking. He was senatorial candidate of PDP in the last election, so he's not a small boy. And he's not a small boy in several ramifications. He's not somebody to be intimidated, because I heard the governor say, the deputy governor is a top government functionary. That's anonymous. Anybody can make any claim, all right? If you had given us a name, we probably would have understood. But because I like to, maybe I'm just nosy, I called the owner of the venue, and the guy said, this is what happened. They are taking funds from the deputy governor's team for that venue. Then they took funds for another pro-government team for the same venue. He's chairman, so he doesn't run day to day. He came and said, I said, no, this is a private investment. Too. I don't want a clash here. You know what? You take your money back. You take your money back. So the pro-government event did not hold. The deputy governor's event did not hold, so that there can be a balance. If you say this pro-government own should not hold, you will look like he's siding this person. If you say the deputy governor's own should not hold, it will look like he's siding. So you just say, you know what?
This big fish was not threatened in any way.
No.
Because that's the feedback that you're getting from the deputy governor.
That's what you just need to go and ask who Matthew Idoekaiwa is. He's the owner of the place. He's not somebody that you can trust. He's been in, and besides, he's a friend of the. If he wanted to play politics, he would have come out outright. He won't act the ostrich and put his head in the ground and say, I'm being threatened. Who can threaten Matthew Idoekaiwa in
Why should we believe you, Mr. Martins? How can this man turn down, funds for an event that will be held by the governor?
If you don't believe me, then you shouldn't believe deputy governor too, because they are both claims. If the deputy governor says that he was turned down from the venue, you don't believe him if you don't believe me. I'm telling you that I spoke to the owner of the place, and a notice came up too that there was going to be, I think it was Governor Obaseki finishing strong in the same venue. It was in the public domain, all right? They were going to hold it there too. On the same day, one for 7:30, one for 8 a.m. And the owner of the place said, I'm not going to have a face-off in my hotel. I know how much I used to build this place. And besides, it's not good for the image of the hotel. So the guy says, you know what? All of you go and look for separate venue to hold the event. Clearly, he lost money, but the money he lost was better off than having a fracas, and then he would have properties damaged.
But believe the deputy governor because, according to him, he's the one at the receiving end of quote-unquote persecution, particularly since he hinted at his ambition.
According to him, and according to me too, because it's both sides of the story. He told his own side of the story. I said, I spoke with the owner of the hotel, and this is what he said.
From what you described, it appears as though the deputy governor paid first, and afterwards, the pro-government team came up for the event, and we know it's first come, first served.
It's not the same venue, sir. The hotel has several halls. So for the sake of...
So essentially the deputy governor paid first.
No, I don't have that information.
No, it's from what you described.
I am telling you that there were two events. I'm not part of the hotel now. There were two events. I'm not telling you what was in the public domain. I'll give you an illustration, for instance. Where I married had two halls. Somebody was marrying downstairs. Me, I was marrying upstairs. Would they say because I am upstairs and then maybe my wedding was going to be bigger, they were not going to rent the hall downstairs? It's a business, and businesses want to maximize profit. It is the potential of a face-off. And then the person who is the manager of the hotel is not a political person. He may not know the interest of the two groups. We're talking about money here. When the owner of the hotel, who is more politically inclined, so I said, no, I'm not going to have this in my hotel. With all due respect, Your Excellency Deputy Governor, this event cannot hold here. You guys who want to also hold the event for government, this event, cannot also hold here. Two of you should go and look for separate venues for the safety and the sanctity of my hotel. That needs to be drawn in.
But do you deny that the deputy governor has been persecuted? I mean, he's been moved out of his official quarters, and apart from that, he says that allocation to his office has been denied in the past 5 months.
I like it when politicians play the victim. We who are the people, we like it. And I like that persecution. I'm asking, because I heard in his speech say, I have been crushed. I'm asking those who crush him to come and crush me. Because the deputy governor lives in a palatial mansion behind the golf course. And he's got several of such apartments and commercial apartments dotted the length and breadth of Edo State. He's got filling stations. So I'm volunteering for those who crush the deputy governor should come and crush Olumati. Any crushing that makes you a multi-billionaire is a good crushing. The deputy governor is not a small boy. And I would like to know the source of, and I'm not, this is just by that, I would like to know the source of his income, because the much I know is that he's been in government. He worked briefly in prison. Of course, as a warder, because like Asha said, I'm in jail, you are in jail too. The only difference is that I'm a prisoner and you are a warder. He worked briefly, but he's not in any way among quote unquote, those who are suffering. So I like that kind of persecution. If it ever exists, I like that kind of persecution that will make me a billionaire. But let me deal with the.
Are you saying he enriched himself with government funds? What exactly?
But like I said, I would like to know the source of. I would like to know, because he said it himself that he's a man of means, and I know that he was in the House of Assembly twice for 8 years. I know that he was in the House of Rep for 2 years. I know he's been deputy governor for 7 years. So I'd like to know where the means is from. I'd like to know where he got, that this is me. I'd like to know where the resources came from for the multiple strings of income, including a lot of commercial apartments for rent and a lot of filling stations. He said it himself that he's a man of means, because we must probe processes. We must ensure, again, Patrick Henry says that, look, those who approach public liberty must be considered as suspects. If my father holds a public office, as far as I'm concerned, my father is a suspect. And it's not about Philip Shaib. It's about anybody who approaches public office. He's a suspect. I'd like to know the source of his the source of the means that he himself says that he has.
Besides the means, well, you seem to be deflecting from the real question, which is about...
No, I'm responding to what he said.
Which is about, the deliberate acts of persecution against him. Do you deny those ones?
Because I haven't seen it. The reason because I haven't seen it is that in Nigeria, they say he who asserts must prove. The deputy governor says that allocation from his office, overhead and fuel allocation, has not been given to him in the past 4 months. I have, and there's let me not say hi. There's document in the public space that proves, otherwise. But then again, is that somebody said politicians don't believe themselves, so they are surprised that we believe them. During political era, people say a whole lot of things. I remember that in the last National Assembly elections, one of the chief spokespersons of the APC campaign team was called to order by the military, because he said that another candidate of the party was in cahoot with the military, and the military had to call him to order. So when you begin to get into the field like that, all kinds of things spew out of politicians. Politicians can say anything for sentiment, to whip up sentiment, and then to appear like they are the victim. Like I said before, the deputy governor is not a small boy. He's a multi-billionaire. Any persecution, I say it again, that has made anybody a multi-billionaire, quote and unquote, is a good persecution. Right. But when you talk about the relocation from the office, look, he himself said it, that a governor, as deputy governor, he can work from anywhere. The governor of the state had his office under renovation. He worked for 6 months from the office of the deputy governor. At any rate, the case going on in Ondo State should give us more explanation. Aketi is in Ibadan, and he's governing Ondo from Ibadan. Well, that is right. But it is the individual that is the office.
So the circumstances are different. But we'd like you to take a listen to part of what Deputy Governor Shaibu said during his interview, particularly on the venue, what exactly transpired, and of course his ambition. So take a listen to this, and we'll continue with the conversation.
About the level that some person within the party are taking it. For instance, a sitting deputy governor, a member of the ruling party in the state, we want to have his declaration, and his senior appointee in government, we call the owner of the filling station of the hotel and tell them if they allow me to use that particular facility, they will revoke and demolish. And for me, it doesn't add up to what our governor believes in and what all of us believe in, because we are asking private sector to come to Edo State. They shouldn't hear those kind of sound that if you have differences, their investment can be destroyed. So for me, that is my worry. So when I said nobody can stop me, yes, no human being, because I believe in God, and God is the only one that has the power, is the omnipresent, omnipotent, that can say something cannot happen. Human being cannot say things cannot happen. No.
So, Mr. Martins, that's the deputy governor, and I find it curious that you said you've spoken to the owner, and you said the owner denies all of this.
Yeah, that's what the owner told me. But if you listen to the speech, the declaration speech of the governor, of the deputy governor, except they didn't read through it, he described the governor as our amiable governor. So I went back to check the word amiable. And amiable means easygoing, pliable, easy to work with. That's the day before. The reason I'm saying so is that, you know, a comedian cracked a joke and said he was working in Warri, and somebody was using his phone. And the person would put the phone here, put the phone. After I went to call the person, so put your phone for one pocket now. I said, is it your phone? He said, because I want to thief the phone. So if you put it in different pocket, I will know the strategy. I seem to think that the deputy governor has a knack for, this is my opinion, for drama. Because if you remember, there was a time he came to say he brought up a court case. Then he said he would do the court case that people advised him. Then he went to his office and said he didn't get notice to his office. Then he came back to say, the governor is my friend. I am missing, the governor. So I'm a little bit confused. Exactly what does the deputy governor want? In the movie that we watched years ago, The Good, the Bad, and the Young, if you want to shoot a man, shoot. Don't talk. I don't like this vacillation of describing the governor as amiable and the next day attempting to, if you like to say, to denigrate or to, attack the government. If you want to pull out with the governor and pull a war with, that's fine. In his word, like I said, he who asserts must prove. Anybody can say.
But how much choice has the deputy governor got? You talk about drama. Let's refer to some drama amid these sequence of events. The deputy governor also made a public apology to the governor, amid all of this. And it was hoped that after that, some form of reconciliation would have taken place. But even after, he had been denied access to certain events with the governor.
No, he hasn't been denied. He was at Alagodao. I was at Alagodao. And he was at Alagodao. He has gone to the office. He has prayed and sanctified the office. He has moved into the office. And he has said the office is good for him to work with. It is instructional to note, sir, that this is not the first time in Edo State that a deputy governor will want to succeed his principal. Comrade Adams Aliu Oshomolik said it in public that for reasons, whether he was right or wrong, he didn't support his own deputy, Pius Odubu, when Pius Odubu wanted to succeed office with him. And of course, naturally, politics is about contestation. Power is not a stroll in the park. I'm not sure that, apart from supporting him, I'm sure he didn't, give him the structure, the space that he needed. But we didn't see all of this during Dr. Pius Odubu's time. We also saw the same thing with Chief Mike Ogiadume. He wanted to succeed his principal, Lucky Benedium. And we didn't see all of this for us. So my worry is the fact that, supposing it is even there, that the governor even comes out openly, even if he has not said so. Because all the things that we're hearing is from the deputy governor. We have not seen any action. We have not seen anything from the governor's side that suggests that he doesn't want his deputy governor to contest. It is his right. My problem is that you're not the first deputy governor. Why must you think that the roof must come down and then you must constantly paint a picture? I'm telling you that Ogiadome, Pius Odubu did not receive the support of his principal, and he made it abundantly clear. But Pius Odubu went about it maturely, because you must first of all get the ticket. I would expect that the deputy governor will move around the rank and file of the political party and not heighten tension within the state, because you don't have the ticket of the party yet. When you have the ticket of the party, and then the governor does not support you, even though now that you have the ticket of the party, then you can say, okay, I don't have the ticket of the party. But the real issues are not just what the deputy governor is saying. The real issues is the fact that the preponderance of opinion and the sheer plethora of interest in the Edo State tilts comfortably towards those who are in the Edo Central. Those are the real issues. I do not want us to divert from it.
Okay, Mr. Martins, so you say that the governor is not supporting him?
I didn't say so. I'm just saying that the governor has not said whether he is supporting him or whether he is not supporting him.
Is the governor supporting him?
I don't know whether the governor is supporting him. There is no act. Shakespeare said, giving amongst men, by which cannot
you just alluded to him not having the support of the governor just now.
I'm saying that it's not necessary for him to have. I'm saying that it's not necessary that whether the governor is happy or not, the mood of the governor, the emotions of the governor, is not necessary for you to aspire for office.
Let's go over to our Abuja studio. Markwe has a couple of questions for you, Markwe.
Mr. Martins, I'd like to first of all know if you have a problem with the deputy governor, Mr. Philip Schreiber.
No. Incidentally, myself and the deputy governor, my father and Comrade Philip Shaibu were in the NAS movement together. We met. I was SUG president in 1999, and he was president of the NAS. He used to come to my room to change. He dropped his bag constantly in my room. We have fought several wars together at several, levels. We are both, comrades, even almost in the same, generation. We talk, constantly. So I have no problem with him. I think he has the capacity. I think he has the history, and I think he has the experience. My problem perhaps is with his methodology. My problem perhaps is the fact that he may be running against the tides, against public opinion. Because like I mentioned just now, the preponderance of opinion is that most people think that given the political balance and sensitivity of Edo State, power should go to the Edo Central, the Esa-speaking people. And the deputy governor coming from the Esako, especially the Uzaire clan, where Comrade Oshomole had been there for 8 years as governor. He's been there for 7 years now, counting as deputy governor. People are thinking that, look, for the priority of the state, power should go to Edo Central that have had the short end of the stick for 24 years since democracy came to us in 1999. It is methodology. It is determination to whip up sentiment and to heat up the politics. That's what I have a problem with. We have had 2 deputy governors who didn't receive the support of their principal, and then we didn't have all of this hoopla. That's what I have an issue with, ma.
So would you say it's in terms of how it's been handled? Because you do know that there's been a recent political history before now. We saw how the current deputy governor and the governor defected from the APC to the PDP, and the circumstances under which they left, and also the fact that now it doesn't look like all is rosy between the governor and his deputy. And it would seem that that is as clear as day. Is it something that worries you when you look at, I mean, you have said that the governor hasn't said anything or done anything, but certainly you can tell when 2 people that used to be very good friends are no longer friends.
Yes, what's this one we're reading about the tortoise? The tortoise was an animal that people just painted as the fact as not being, friendly. If you orchestrate a crisis, and it was Martin Luther King that said violence for violence leads to a violent conflagration in which both parties will lose. It is the orchestration of this crisis. The first salvo that was fired was from the deputy governor when he went to court. And the circumstances of emergency is important because when the deputy governor and the governor moved into the PDP asked for the office of the deputy governor to be ceded to it. And the governor made it abundantly clear that you will go with your ticket if I cannot take my deputy governor along. Don Pedro Obaseki has given us an expose as to how that happened because he was physically there. So for a person, and that happened in Sokoto, Tambuwa ceded the deputy governor to the party. Gabriel Suswan ceded it, was this Gabriel Suswan of Benue State now? The immediate past governor of Benue State ceded it to the party. But in this particular case, the governor was stout to say, look, I am going to go with my deputy governor, Comrade Philip Shaibu. So you would have thought that kind of defense, and even when the immediate past governor, now the FCT minister, took a swipe at the deputy governor. I remember when he said, who is his father? The governor took 3 pages to defend the deputy governor. So I thought that their romance was watertight and nothing was going to break it until I saw the injunction by the deputy governor that he was going to be impeached. And for some of us, we knew that there was no impeachment. Is not a day thing. It's not done nocturnally. There's a process to it. And we hadn't known that an impeachment notice had been brought to the court. So it came as a surprise. So for me, it looked like deputy governor is fired the first salvo, is fired the second salvo, and is consistently firing salvo. To me, it appears that this is his methodology. I listened to what the deputy governor, at that time when they were campaigning, said about Comrade Adams Aliu Oshomole, where he literally called him a psychiatric patient. I listened to that, and I listened to several swipes that he took over. And so for me, it appears that this is his methodology. I just want to advise, as a young man, because if you say that you are young must not always mean that we must do things, in a brash way. We can also be calm about it. We can be strategic about it and communicate our interest to those whom our interests reflect. in. If your interest doesn't reflect with the preponderance of opinion, where most people think that the Esa-speaking people, for which I'm one of them, should have power, who not having had power for 24 years, it doesn't mean that you must now bring down the roof because it looks like you are going against the popular opinion of the generality of the Edo people. That's where, I have issues, and that's where I want to perspective it. All the other issues, for me, are just throwing dust in the air. The core issue is the fact that people are agitated, that Edo Central has not had the opportunity, and they should have the opportunity this time. Philip Shaibu is from Edo North, is from Esako. Esako cannot claim to have not had a fair share of representation. I'm glad that your husband is also, from Edo North, because the immediate past minister is from there. The present minister is also, from there. The senator is from, Esako. And Uzaire clan especially has enjoyed power. In a plural state, in a sensitive state that has 3 tripods, except people can tell me what the Esa people have done. And if they have done something, I probably will be the first one to say, as an Esa man, as I know where I'm back, I will apologize. But if I've not done anything, I can't understand to why they say that power must move constantly between Edo, our brothers in Edo South, and incidentally, you have to pass through Edo Central to get to Edo North, and then move to, Edo North at the detriment. It was Patrick Henry that says, as pleasure becomes so desirable that we must pay for it at the expense of chain and slavery. He said, God Almighty forbid. For I know not what others will choose, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. We must demonstrate. We must not be fear. We must not be afraid to negotiate. I must not negotiate out of fear.
Mr. Martin,
the Edo Central people are willing to negotiate, but they will not negotiate out of fear. These are the real issues, and these are the issues I want to put forth.
Okay. Mr. Martins, thank you for putting out those issues and trying to bring clarity to them. But you are from the canvassers for democracy and the rule of law. So my question to you would be, which is more important, that the people of Edo State enjoy good governance, or that a governor is coming from one place or the other? Which one should we be canvassing for more?
No, absolutely. Good governance comes ultimately. But good governance is not the prerogative of a senatorial district. There are people who have the capacity and the capability, the ability and the stability to deliver good governance in the 3 senatorial districts. If it was about good governance, if we're talking simply about good governance, perhaps we'll not have the present president. But I know when the president says, as far as Nigeria is concerned, Emilio Con, power, the fact that we must have power position is already a gentleman agreement. So good governance is not the prerogative of anybody. Good governance can come from any part. My organization sits for fairness. I'm a pastor. I sit for equity. I sit for justice, apart from being a civil society activist.
So, Mr. Martins, the question there will be, what would you be asking of all of these people who are vying for the #1 seat in Edo State? What are the things that the people of Edo State should be looking and expecting from them?
We will be expecting that the person who wants to aspire to be the governor of Edo State must have demonstrated capacity in his own individual space. He must have distinguished himself as an achiever. I'm a little bit weary of those who have lived off Nigeria's rent, who have not done anything successfully outside the political arena. I'm a little bit weary of that. I am more comfortable with those who have succeeded in a private estate. Because if you succeed in little, the chances are that you will succeed in much. That's the kind of thing I want to look at. I want to look at somebody who has a rich academic background, who has had exposure. The reason is because young people today are clamoring that education is a scam. And we can't leave that kind of idea in their mind. We must let them know that the more educated you are, the more exposed you are, the more you have the capacity to understand the yearnings and the aspirations of the people. Those are the kind of things that I'm looking at. Above all, I'm looking at somebody who has empathy, because without the connectivity, the collectivity of empathy, you can't lead the people. Like they say, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. How much you have helped other people in the private space, in the darkness, will demonstrate to us how you can help other people when you are given the opportunity to preside over public patrimony.
Well, we have to anchor, but just to quickly ask, are you then asking that the deputy governor abandons his ambition? Should you want him to step down?
No. I mean, I wish I could, because nature has been kind to him. He's transversed the length and breadth of Edo State.
So do you want him to step
down? No, of course not. Look,
right.
Archbishop, let me quickly say, Archbishop Edo has said, if you have a desire, do not retire, but refire to acquire your desire. But go by it solemnly.
Okay.
Go by it maturely.
Well, we have to anchor at this point, but there's a whole lot to discuss about this, because some will say if Governor Obaseki had not done 8 years, then perhaps Edo Central would have had their own 8 years. So now we have Edo South doing 16 now, Edo North 8, and still Edo Central hasn't gotten. But the conversation is out there.
That's subject to, like I said,
so they will ask if you were this, agitated then.
Edo North has done 24 years between governor and deputy.
This is particularly about governorship, and that's what you're clamoring for.
You know, we call it joint office. It's not joint ticket.
No, you're clamoring. Your quest is that Edo Central gets the governorship.
Even at that, Edo Central is this short-changed. They have only done 20 months in the advent of this 1999 to now, just 20 months. Even at that, it is still an imbalance.
Mr. Martin, the people do not view power sharing as you're viewing it between governor and deputy. The governor's office is the big deal.
I agree. I agree. But even at that, the Edo Central is still short-changed. About 20 months.
We have to go now. I'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Olumartin, Executive Director, Canvassers for Democracy and the Rule of Law. Thank you for your time, and wish Edo State the very best. Well, let's take a look at some of the mails that you have sent in this morning. Let's begin from, well, this particular mail is from is on FG's borrowing, and it talks about the new borrowing plan of the federal government after the removal of a fuel subsidy, and the attendant suffering of the masses broke my heart. This is a mail from Dixon Eka saying that today we have an extra large federal cabinet with 48 ministers, and almost every ministry having a deputy minister. And you can see all of those concerns raised by Dixon Eka this morning.
Well, this one is from Professor Inakena. Very quickly, he says, government must pursue the diversification of revenue sources. This is particularly of fact. Federal government must invest in the agriculture sector, which is rural-based and peasant-driven, as it is now. We must invest intensively in commercial farming. He also says government must secure our farmland, especially the tens of thousands of ungoverned spaces in the north can be used for commercial agriculture. Thank you, Professor Inakena.
And Festus Akimboyewa says now that the 2024 appropriation bill has been presented to NAS, our legislators must ensure that the budget to give our children and youth long-time opportunities to thrive. The increase in the amounts budgeted for education and health should be applauded. We want to see effective investment in human capital development, and that's what will give our young people a pathway to success. Indeed. Well, indeed, we have to thank you all very much for sending in your feedback. So sorry that we can't take much more.
Indeed. So the pathway to success is what we're all headed to. So your feedback, indeed, we appreciate. We can't take all, but thank you so much for letting them come in. And thank you for letting us be a part of your morning. Go there and do the best you can to be a part of where we're going, the path to success, indeed. I'm Neota Igbe.
I'm Maope Ogun Yusuf. Thank you.
I'm Bukola Koka. Bye for now.
I'm Kayode Kikiolu. Thank you.
Labour Party, Labour Party, Labour Party, who's your guy? See how sweet they like beans and rice. Labour Party, I will never leave